What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now let's get cozy and start today's episode. What if we committed to making our businesses a catalyst for change? If you want to do business differently and embrace being a pioneer, rebel, and culture maker in your industry, then this episode is for you. You're going to learn why it's important for us to tear down the power structures we've been trying to step away from and the power of building community first. You're listening to episode 134 of the Lead with Love podcast. And in today's conversation, I get cozy with Tara McMullin, who is on a mission to turn today's small business owners into tomorrow's economic powerhouses. Yes, she is the founder of CoCommercial, a platform for helping small business owners work together to achieve their big business goals. She's also the host of What Works, which I actually just recently, my episode just went live, so I'll make sure to link in the show notes. And it's a podcast that takes you behind the scenes of successful small businesses and shows you what's working in marketing, operations, time management, product development, and so much more. And Entrepreneur even named the What Works podcast one of the top 24 women-hosted podcasts for business owners. So definitely take a listen. Tara is also a sought-after speaker, educator, and a best-selling money and life expert on CreativeLive. And her work has been featured in Fast Company, Inc., DailyWorth, Forbes, and the Huffington Post. You can find out more about CoCommercial and request your invitation by going to CoCommercial.co. So I want to give you a little sneak peek of some of the things that we talk about in today's conversation. One thing that we talk about is why Tara moved from a traditional scaled coaching business to focus on building community first. We also talk about how to see the biggest barrier that people in your community are facing right now, and Tara's intention in building CoCommercial membership without using her personal brand to grow it. And she also shares some of the behind the scenes challenges that she has faced along the way in making that intentional decision. We also cover how products can evolve through multiple iterations over many years. And I really love her specific example of how she's done that and what CoCommercial originally started as, which is really, really cool. Tara also shares some of her experiences in operating a brick and mortar business and why she feels her latest business is now like a toddler in many ways. And also we talk about team building and some things that I think are super important for business owners to know, and some things that she's noticed that a lot of companies can get wrong, and she'll share how she's been able to get it right. And we also talk about the one skill every entrepreneur needs, so definitely tune in. And of course, you can find full show notes from this episode over at jadaselner.com/134. Now let's get cozy with Tara McMullin. Hi, Tara.
Hello.
Oh, I'm so excited to just jam with you. I feel like you and I are soul sisters when it comes to being cozy, and we are like embracing the fall weather that is yet to come.
It's the promise of fall.
Yes, yes. I'm so excited to connect with you. I've actually been watching your entrepreneurial journey over many years. And I definitely want to dig into this a little bit more as we get deeper into our conversation. But I know that, you've been writing for small businesses in the online space for over 9 years, which is fascinating. And I've probably at least hit half of that, just consuming your content and what you share with the world. And I've just always been attracted to how you build, because I know you are about the quiet power and really embracing, if you are an introvert in the online world and online space and small businesses, that you can still shine and you can still serve. And it's just been so beautiful to watch that evolution for how you show up and serve in that way in your business.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Awesome. So, I always like to start with a pretty big question, which is, what does leading with love mean to you? And how do you put love into practice in your business?
Well, I love this question. And, truthfully, it really got me thinking just even a couple of minutes ago when you first kind of posed it. And, my business went through a huge shift almost 2 years ago now, shortly after the US 2016 election, where I think I had sort of a reckoning around, if not this exact question, sort of a reckoning around this concept of, how am I leading? What am I creating? And is it actually having the impact that I want it to have? Because I think that there's maybe a difference between, just helping people make more money or helping people create their businesses and helping people see a way forward economically, commercially, creatively, that fulfills them, but not only fulfills them, fulfills our desires for our communities, for our culture, for our society. And so the 2016 was a really big wake-up call, or 2016 election was a really big wake-up call for me around this idea. And, my business had looked very, very much like a traditional kind of scaled coaching and strategy business. And I decided to kind of tear all of that down and start building community first. And so to me, what leading with love looks like and the way that it's implemented in our business is by really empowering people to find their own answers in the relationships that they have with other small business owners. And I think that as we help people cultivate those relationships, as we look at what it means to take a positive but not Pollyanna approach to business building, as we build a culture that values honesty and transparency and generosity, those are some of the things that we're doing to lead with love in our own business, and to not just lead with it, but to really build our whole business model and approach and perspective and positioning around that kind of concept.
I love you leading with building community first, being a community builder at heart over here. I'm just doing the happy dance, but I'm so fascinated by the wake up call and, the season of the election in 2016. Can you take me back to that time and what was the reckoning, the emotions, the fears, the hesitations? Is there a specific moment or incident that happened that kind of opened up this new way of, I think I'm going to tear everything down that I just built and rebuilt something, leading with building community first?
Yeah. I think at the time, I didn't actually understand what was going on inside my head, to be completely honest. I knew something needed to change, and I had a pretty good inkling of what it needed to change to, if I didn't quite know why it needed to change. And so, at the risk of going into political territory, but I always like to make when it comes to politics in my business, I like to always make the caveat that it's a small P when I'm talking about politics in my business. I have very strong capital P politics opinions. When it comes to my business, I'm really looking at political systems as in systems of power, and where does power lie, and are we okay with that? And how are we empowering new groups of people, more diverse groups of people who have traditionally been disempowered? What does that look like? So what I have come to realize, and very strongly, even just in the last couple of weeks, this image has come back to me over and over again, is that, one of the parts of the 2016 election, that whole campaign that really stood out to me was Trump at the Republican National Convention saying, only I can fix these problems. Only I can do this. Only I can do that. Only I can do this other thing. Just me. And I started to notice, and this was even, now 2 years after, I started to notice that what was happening so much in our online business space and in my own business at the time was sort of a structure that necessitated us saying the same things about our own businesses, our own frameworks, our own strategies, our own formulas, our own programs. Only I can fix this revenue problem for you. Only I can fix this business design problem for you. Only I can fix your marketing problem. And that there are whole sales models, sales funnels structured around that underlying concept. We might not come out and say it just in and of itself like that, but that's a lot of what's going on underneath the surface. And to me, that meant that if we were just playing into that same sort of authoritarian model, that we weren't actually the kind of pioneers and rebels and culture makers that we claimed to be. And I totally put myself into this category. And I wanted to be those things instead of not being those things, right? I wanted to get back to an understanding of business as being a catalyst for change, a catalyst for culture making, a catalyst for empowerment, as opposed to something that just inadvertently picked up the same power structures that we had had before. And so it's taken a really long time to come to an understanding of what was actually going on in those moments of kind of despair and questioning and, the decision to dismantle all of the things that I had built to that point. But, in hindsight, I think that's really what was going on for me. And that I realized in that model of, I can do this for you, I can do that for you, I can do this other thing for you, there wasn't room for real sustainable, long-term impact at a community level or a cultural level. And that's what I really wanted to accomplish with my business. And so for me, everything had to change.
I have this image. I was just voxing with my friend, Nikki Elledge Brown, and this image is popping up for me now as you share this, of really empowering people to have the authority for the decisions that they make, which is what it sounds like that you're saying is like to giving that power back to the people to make those decisions for themselves and their businesses. And there's this image of, I think about my husband, we've done tandem bike riding where my husband's kind of riding the bike and then my daughter's in the back and she's kind of coasting and adding like extra weight in the back, but he's the one that's doing all of the pedaling and like leading the way. And so then Zoe doesn't really get to learn how to ride a bike. And there's another image of when we actually give people the tools, the structure where it's like, okay, here's your bike, here's the training wheels, so you can start to feel what it's like to ride the bike on your own, and then ultimately getting to like release those training wheels, and they are still the ones like leading the way. They're the ones that are learning to pedal, and they may kind of sway side to side until they find that balance for themselves and how their body works on that bike. But I think, I don't know, that image just popped up for me and thinking of like trying to empower the one who is doing all the powering and pedaling, when actually we need to give that power to the people to be able to do that for themselves.
I completely agree. And I completely love that metaphor. And I may steal it from you in the future. I will totally credit you. But, the other thing that comes to my mind while you're describing that too, is that I think on one level, yes, absolutely. It's about giving people the tools and the power that they need to make the best decisions for their own businesses. But inside of our community, another thing that we're always thinking about is actually giving people the tools to even ask their own questions. And what we find is such a huge barrier to people joining our community, making use of our community, diving into our community, is that they don't feel comfortable asking their own questions. They don't feel comfortable saying, hey, this is what's going on for me. Can you tell me about your experience with this challenge or your experience with this obstacle? And I think that goes back to the same idea of where the power is, because not only have we often taken the and said, we'll fix your problems. My system will make everything better. But we've also taken care of asking the questions for them, right? Like, what is content marketing? Content marketing is a lot of asking questions for people. Here, this is the question you should be asking. I know you think you have a social media problem, but here, really, you have a sales problem. Let me show you the questions you should be asking. And of course, the questions behind those things have an agenda, right?
Yes.
We want them to ask those questions because we have the answers to them. And I'm not saying that that's not, I think that there's a way that we can help people ask better questions that doesn't have to be necessarily manipulative. But at the same time, like, we need to be training people and helping people formulate their own analysis, formulate their own understanding of where they need support, where things are breaking down. And so that's a big thing that we do for people too. We try and actually not give them any tools for running their businesses. And we focus all of our energy on giving them the tools to ask the right questions, to offer support in a way that's really helpful so that they can take care of the tools and the ideas and the frameworks between each other. And we're there to provide the structure and the tools for actually helping them ask for the support that they need, because we see that as training them in a skill that's going to serve them no matter what direction their business takes, no matter how big their business gets, no matter where they might move to in the world. That's a skill that every single entrepreneur needs, and most entrepreneurs are lacking.
And I know this is talking about your CoCommercial community, right? The membership community. And I'm curious, there was some intentionality in building this membership community. And I know your face is not on there. And so I'm curious, if there was any fears and hesitation that you had in not using your face, and what has worked about it? And is there anything that's kind of been challenging in this process, going from you being more of a personal brand, and also you've recently changed your last name? Like, there's just so much shift and transformation happening, but I'm curious, what was the thought process behind building a company, building a membership resource tool for small businesses where you are not the face of the company?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say it's what I had been wanting to do for years and didn't know how to go about doing it. I didn't think I had the idea for what it could be. Like, I looked at Nathan Barry over at ConvertKit, and I looked at Laura Roeder at Meet Edgar, and I looked at all of these people who had jumped the ship from coaching or information marketing and headed into a space where they were building something truly scalable, something that they could, something that relied on the teamwork of other people, something that was helping thousands or millions of people. I was like, I want that, but I have no idea what that would look like for me. I'm not a developer. I don't have even an idea of a software product. And it kind of dawned on me in this time of crisis that the idea was underneath my nose the whole time. It was an offer that we had kind of always had on the back burner, which was a community. And it needed to be rebranded, and it needed to be given new life, a new space and a new container and new policies and all of these different things. But it was there the whole time. So that was sort of point number one, is just that this is what I really wanted. I didn't want to be a personal brand. I didn't want to be the face of everything. I wanted to build something bigger and more sustainable and longer lasting that didn't require me to guide it and direct it outside of, for the time being the CEO. And so that's part number one. The second piece kind of goes back to that idea that I didn't want people to think that I had all the answers, because I don't. And I think that anyone who tells you that they have all the answers, and I don't know that there's really anyone out there saying that, but I do think there are a lot of people out there implying that we have all the answers, that, so-and-so $1 million coach has all the answers. So-and-so, $1 million program creator has all the answers. I didn't want people to look at me like that anymore. I didn't want to have to kind of try to come up with an answer to every question that came my way. I was tired of that. And I was tired of the kind of the farce of that. And so that was a really intentional part of the rebrand and move toward having a non-Terra leading brand, was just stepping away from this idea that I was the one with all the answers. So that was a big piece of it. And then the third piece of it was that we really, honest to goodness, wanted to foster community. And community doesn't happen between the leader and each of the different members. Community happens member to member. It's a many to many model, not a one to many model. And that was incredibly important to me. And so the more my face was involved, the more my message was the message we were leading with, that was going to hinder our progress toward that goal, toward that ideal. Now, in terms of challenges, it's been one huge challenge, because all of the assets, the marketing assets that we had that were the biggest, whether it was my Facebook page or my email list or my website, the things that had the most authority, the things that had the most followers, those were all in my name. And I didn't necessarily want to give those things up either. So I wouldn't think of it as like a safety net. It was more just like, I've built some of these things as like very personal assets of mine. Like my Instagram account is a very personal social media asset of mine. There's no way I'm going to go and change the name of that to CoCommercial. And so it was a lot of trying to figure out how to balance being a spokesperson for our brand versus being the face of our brand or being the embodiment of our brand. And so that's taken a long time. I think I'm finally at a place where I can say I've got it pretty well figured out now. But really, that was a fairly minor challenge compared to just realizing how much of my personal identity was wrapped up in being a personal brand and being the go-to person. Because for as much as I might say, well, I don't want to be the go-to person, I don't want to be the person with all the answers, I felt like, especially at the beginning, every day, every week, maybe now more like every couple weeks, every month, there would be a time when I would feel like, but why didn't you ask me?
Right.
Or like, I can solve that problem. And feeling really caught up in that that's not me anymore. I'm actively not the expert, and people are starting, well, they've always responded that way, right? People have always looked toward other people for answers, but it's come to a head in a new way. And just also understanding, like, every time I pulled back, like, there was a new layer of realizing, well, my assumption is this, my default action is that, and it was all tied up in me, 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 me. And so it's been a real process of little bit by little bit by little bit by little bit, unpacking that and making sure that the focus isn't on me anymore, but is always on you, always on our members. This, our marketing is about the story of our members. Our sales is about the story of our members. Our positioning is about the story of our members. And in that, there is room for me as a member. So just as a really specific thing, one of the things that I realized I needed to do from the beginning was, instead of talking about myself as a leader or talking about myself as sort of the figurehead of our community, I needed to talk about myself as a super user. Like, I'm there to ask questions and share my experiences and act in the same way that our members act. And so that means that when I do show up on social media as myself, when I do write blog posts as myself, which I do very, very frequently, I'm showing up as a member as much as I'm showing up as a founder and a CEO. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes so much sense. And I'm really fascinated by the iteration of CoCommercial, because you mentioned that it was kind of under your nose all the time. And so what was it before it got the rebrand and repositioning?
Yeah. So there's a lot of iterations actually. But I'll start so the container of it and the initial community of it was a product that we had called Kickstart Labs. And this is this is a long time. So 6-7 years ago now, we had I had at that point, a suite of products that all had Kickstart in the name. And I had decided to kind of all bundle them up and put them in a membership site, like so many people do or were doing at the time. And so we called it Kickstart Labs. And there was a community element to it. We had a group on Google Plus because I didn't want to have it on Facebook. Still a good decision. And so there was that kind of origin story of it. But CoCommercial, the name, actually came from a sort of minimum viable product version of a co-working space I started in Astoria, Oregon 5 years ago. And like 5 years ago this month. And that minimum viable product of a co-working space didn't really work out. It wasn't that I don't think a co-working space could have worked there. It was that I thought I had the time for it and I did not. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was really passionate about sort of the idea and the brand story that I had created around what CoCommercial could be. And the reason it was called CoCommercial was Main Street in Astoria, Oregon is actually Commercial Street. And so it was commercial because like co-working on CoCommercial.
Yes,
anyhow,
absolutely.
That's what it was. And so when we pivoted from the labs product into this being, instead of a back burner offer being our front facing only offer, I knew it needed a different name. It needed something that could grow. It needed something that could represent and grow with the community as it grew and as it evolved. And I realized that I had this brand and this story and this positioning from, a few years ago sitting in my hard drive. And we were moving fast at the time because I was so over the old business model. So I was like, great, I'm going to dust that off, change it from blue to yellow, and we're going to be done. And so that's literally the origin story of the brand, like from a kind of a tactical perspective. But just, the community element of it is not a new thing. Like I said, it's 6-7 years old at this point, and we have members who are still members today who started with us from the very first offer 6 or 7 years ago. And so it is a very rich community relationship wise, and there's a lot of depth of relationship and love and trust that is sort of the linchpin of how the community works. And so now when members join, the feeling of warmth and honesty and depth and transparency and love that is there is apparent from the moment someone new comes in, which is to me both fascinating and I feel like really lucky to have it. And I think, sure, there's things that we've done over the years to make that work. And there's reason that it's like that. But at the same time, like I still allow myself to feel a little lucky about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a huge part of what separates what we do from what people find in a lot of Facebook groups or in a lot of other membership sites. And I could talk more about that, but that culture element to me it's not just something that we've tried to implement over the last couple of years. It's actually something that begins with the origin of the community in the first place.
Yeah. What I love is one that we just unpacked. This is a several years of iterations, because I think people don't see that, we could see CoCommercial like just came out and it's like booming, or all of those pieces. And it's like, I have some of those blue PDFs of the Kickstart Lab in my iBooks, app. So it's really cool to see how that has evolved. And for anyone who is also kind of exploring in their business, like you might have something that you've already been working on and it feels like you're always starting from scratch or starting new, but there's actually just iterations and things evolve and they transform over time. And sometimes it's the name that's changing, or it's the content behind the scenes, or it's how much you are present and being the one that's teaching, or, I think that there's just so much to play with and richness in there. And one thing that I'm curious about is what it felt like for you when you kind of invested time, energy, money into a physical space, into a physical business idea. Because I've been a brick and mortar business owner before too, and I know it's not easy. But what was going on in your mind when you knew it wasn't working, that you kind of had to shut out the physical space? What was going on for you during that time?
Well, the reason it wasn't working was because I was having so much success in other areas. So I think that, I didn't actually have a lot of attachment to the outcome of that space in the first place. And so sort of the quote unquote failure of it wasn't a big deal. It was like, well, I had the money, I had the time at the beginning to give it a try. I think it was an experiment that paid off in other ways. And I even knew at the time, long before I knew CoCommercial was going to have a different life, I knew that experiment would pay off in a different way. It reminds me of my mom, who was for a long time a seamstress and a very, very successful seamstress by seamstress standards in the area where we grew up, which is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And for 30 years, she had a career as a professional seamstress and had customers in and out of our house on a, multi-day, multiple times a day, every single day, but Sundays. And she worked her bones off for that. But there were different times when she tried to scale it up, some more successfully than others. And I can remember her saying all the different times she tried to scale up, whether it was hiring a seamstress to work with her or whether it was opening a brick and mortar space, she would always say, I'll kick myself if I don't try. And so I find myself always, very often, coming back to that same idea that, well, I don't know if this is going to work. It could put me thousands of dollars in debt. This could explode everything, but I'm going to kick myself if I don't try. And I feel like that was true at that time. And it's true to this day with the current business that we have. It's like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to a place where our business is producing what we want it to produce, where it's growing the way we want to grow, where we're able to say to someone, you know what you need? A small business peer support community. And they're like, yeah, that is what I need. Because right now, that's a really hard sell. I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, I don't want to go back to doing business the way I did it before. And I knew at the time when I ripped the Band-Aid off that if I didn't give it a try, I was going to kick myself. And so those were my sort of mixed feelings.
Yeah,
all the process of not only opening the brick and mortar space, but making this pivot too.
Yeah, I love it. And, I know there's an article that you wrote called How to Know When It's Time to Quit a Project, Goal, or Business. And I feel like that you live and breathe the testing, the iterations, the experimentation, and the trying. So to be able to get the insight and the feedback that you need to get really clear and what's the next direction that I need to move into.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you bring that up because my mother's voice is always in one ear. And then in that article, I quoted an interview I did with Nathan Barry from ConvertKit, and his voice is always in my other ear when he was talking about whether or not ConvertKit was going to take off or not. And the decision that he made to let go of a successful business in order to pursue this new business, and the time frame that he was in and the choices that he made, it is always ringing in the other ear. And I'm regularly thinking about that is, have I given this business everything that it needs to succeed? And until the answer is yes, and it's still not working, I'm going to still keep working at it. And that's not to say things aren't bad. It's just, because we've made this pivot in the way that we have, I have a lot to juggle right now. We've got a team with full-time team members. We've got, members of our community who are depending on us in a way that our clients and our customers didn't depend on us before. And so I'm kind of acutely aware all the time of the demands on this business in a new way. And it means that I am regularly having to step up in new ways too, which is both terrifying and incredibly exciting. And so that's, when I think oh God, maybe this just isn't going to work. Maybe this is the time to quit. What is that even going to look like? I just come back to those two voices in my head and know that, one, I believe in this. I believe it can be more successful than I've even allowed myself to dream at this point. And two, I haven't done everything that I need to do to get it to that point. I've done a lot. I continue to do a lot. I do everything that I think of, but we're still in the process of it. And I think that would be true of any startup in its second year. And that's essentially how I think about it too, is like, okay, yes, I've got almost a decade in this online business world, but this business that we're in now essentially is still a toddler. And we're still teaching it how to walk. We're still teaching it how to speak. We're still teaching it how to make its needs known. And every time I learn something new, we evolve and adapt and show up in a different way. And every time we do that, we are rewarded in just the most incredible ways. And so I keep showing up for that every single day.
I love that. I love it's almost like you have this checklist of things. It's like, well, have you tried everything? And if the answer is no, there's still work to do, because I think that we can give up on things too soon, too early. And, if we think about, what is the book that I'm thinking about? Like the hockey stick moment. It's Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know why that book is like going over my head right now, but just that moment, right? It's like everything, it's those people that kind of make it beyond like, and I know in that same article, you talked about your Aptive?
Yeah. Aptive.
Yes. And where the fitness trainer on there says the real workout starts when you want to stop.
Right.
And it's like, should I keep going? And it's like, did you do everything? And if you didn't, there's still more opportunity on the table. And we can hold the parallel also to our relationships. It's just like, did I put everything that I possibly could? And I know I did the same thing with Simple Green Smoothies, and like it did achieve a level of success, but I didn't know if I wanted to keep contributing to the growth of the company. And so it's like just putting everything on the table and like, is this still the aligned business model for me? Let me do anything, everything. And then it's like, nope, this is not an aligned fit anymore for me. And I'm ready to make that next step. And then looking at those next business models, even though, I have almost 10 years of experience as an entrepreneur, that there's still new business models being built, and like the market doesn't know about your baby, your toddler yet. And so I think that's just, I love your lens on that there's still more work to do. And then once you've exhausted that list, then we can explore the pivot or quitting a project, a goal, or business.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that comes to mind, and maybe it's a little bit of a change of subject, but the thing that comes to mind to me as you were speaking to is that work, not only is it going in to make this toddler a fully functioning and self-supporting adult, but that work is also going to making me a better person, a better leader, a better CEO, a better community builder. Every time I show up for the work in a new way, in a different way, every time I try a new piece of work, it's teaching me something about myself and what I have to deliver. And that's been a really, really important and transformative part of this process for me too.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned you're looking at some business models for inspiration and what you're building now. And I'm just curious, what were some of the top takeaways that you got from, and you mentioned Nathan Barry, but also Laura Roeder. Just, I'm sure you've dived deep into the research, and what are some of the big takeaways that you are applying and integrating to CoCommercial at this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. No one has ever asked me that before. So let me think on that. I think the first thing is that for both Laura and Nathan, both have a point of pride in the way that they take care of their people, and not just their customers, but their team as well. And I think Laura was perhaps the first person I ever talked to about team building way, way back at the very first World Domination Summit in Portland. And I remember just feeling so inspired by her take on how other people could help you build your business. Because at that point, like, I think I had a virtual assistant, or I had someone doing, some side tasks for me, but I had not really comprehended the idea of building a team and getting support from people in a really grounded, foundational way. And she made me want to do that. Like the way she talked about her people, the way she talked about the work that they were doing, the way she talked about the possibilities when you had that kind of team team behind you and behind your idea and behind your customers, that all really, really appealed to me. And I know Nathan has a lot of very similar views on that as well. And so that's always been a huge thing, is that not only do I want to help people make better businesses and make better business decisions and become better founders, but I want to make better jobs for people. And I want to have a better place for people to work. And so I really, really wanted to have a business model that sustains that. I said to my operations manager a few weeks ago that I literally told her, I know how to make a lot more money than we're making right now. Right. And she said, well, why aren't we doing that? And I said, because that kind of business doesn't need you. And it's true. Mm-hmm. That kind of business does not need her. That might not mean that she wouldn't be an asset to that kind of business, but she wouldn't be the kind of linchpin team member that she is in the business that we have now. And that's a choice that I have made, is that I want a business that requires a team of people to be working together toward a single goal. It's not even that I don't want to do it on my own. I don't want to be the bottleneck. I don't want to be the person that everyone relies on. Our business does not rely on me now. And I love it. It's wonderful. And so that's probably the biggest thing. And then from there, that kind of dictates choices that I make about our business model as well. But it also, I think, forms sort of the widest structure for the culture that we're trying to create inside of CoCommercial as well, which is this idea that we all have something to contribute and we all have something to gain. And that means there is no one person, there is no one expert, there is no one idea person that we must have there to make it work. And that to me is also really freeing. And I think that says something about the kind of culture that I want to see form outside of CoCommercial too, where we're all interdependent, where we understand that whether it's in the business community or it's in your school community or it's in your political community, in wherever you live, that we all have something to contribute and we all have something to gain from that as well. We can all receive support from that, and that's a necessary part of being a community. And I think that there are a lot of places today where we have lost that as sort of a global community. And I want to see us engage with that more. And CoCommercial, to me, from the business model up, is a very small part of how I can make a contribution to that.
That's awesome. Something that I'm curious about is, what is something that you do inside your team that you guys actually implement or make a part of, your team culture that you feel really proud of?
Oh, I would say I still don't feel really proud of how we run our team. And that's all on me. It's not on Shannon at all. So, they would probably argue with me, but I think that one thing that, and this is probably true of most teams, but one thing I'm proud of is that our people bring their whole selves to our team. And so that means, we probably, again, like most people, we've got a random channel in our Slack group. And that means, I post about my 5K PR, and my operations manager, Shannon, posts about her latest music gig with her band. And my husband posts about some fermentation thing that he's working on. And that Kristen, our member experience specialist, posts about a hike that she took to look for new herbs for her herbalism business, for her skincare line. And that to me is something that I'm really proud of, looking at our people as whole people and not just people who are showing up to do tasks that we've assigned to them. And I think the other thing, now that I'm in this conversation a little bit more, and I'm thinking through this a little bit more in an integrated way, and kind of along the same lines, our team members have ownership over things. And this is where I think a lot of online small business owners go wrong with building out their teams, as they build out their teams with task doers. I need someone to do this. I need someone to do that. I need someone to do this other thing. And in a lot of ways, the team structures that are kind of really prevalent in the online business world exacerbate this problem, where there's one person that runs and owns the business, and then there's a giant team of contractors. And those contractors, by legal necessity, are task doers. And because our team is all employees, I can give ownership to things, or give ownership to people over their areas of work. So Kristen can own the member experience from start to finish. Shannon can own our day-to-day operations and thinking through things. I can own the marketing piece of things. Sean can own the podcast. And that means that not only do I think the work gets done better because people have ownership over it, but it also means I am less of a linchpin in the team. I don't have to be there. I took 3 weeks off to get married this summer and didn't worry about my business at all because all the work that was being done was owned by somebody else months before that. I didn't need to be there, And so that's another thing I think that makes me really proud of how our team runs.
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that makes the work that we have to offer more fulfilling for the people who do it. People by and large don't want to be task doers. They want to have ownership at their jobs. That's one thing that's missing in a lot of people's careers and a lot of people's employment. And if I can, in a small way, provide jobs where ownership is a key piece of the puzzle, again, I think I'm contributing to the way I want things to be done and the culture that I want to see in other areas.
I love that. What's the name of the Slack channel, that specific thread?
It's just called Random.
Random. Awesome.
Where we show up with any random thing. I posted a couple of Instagrams that caught my eye the other day. I always post race photos in there. Shannon posts her music photos in there. It just bubbles up. It's not every single day that something is in there, but when it is, we celebrate it and it's fun and we trade gifts. And I think we're a pretty typical Slack user team. I don't have any special Slack hacks or anything like that. But I think that having something like that, you might think of it as I don't know why this is here. Or
oh no, I completely,
but it's really important.
Oh, it's so important. I'm so big on team culture and, something that we would do with Simple Green Smoothies during our team meetings is the end, it would be on a Thursday and it's what are you looking forward to the most this weekend? Just to share what's happening in your life outside of business about what excites you. And so I think that piece, even though it feels so small and almost oh, that must be trivial, that must not be a thing. It actually is creating that culture and that community and that connection and celebration of we are whole human beings that are bringing ourselves to this work, this mission, and we still have personal lives. So I think that is very beautiful that you have that within your team.
Well, thank you.
And I'm curious, was there any hesitations that you had or struggles in letting go of you were the bottleneck at some point in the business. And I think all entrepreneurs tend to be until they can let go and really give ownership to the team. But there is that straddle that happens of I know I'm the bottleneck. I know I should hire people, but how do I release control and all of the perfectionism and branding and positioning? Just curious if you had any of that and how did you get over that mindset hump?
Yeah. So I just want to give you a giant laughing emoji for that question. Yes. I had all of the things, like you said, perfectionism, bottlenecking, all of the things.
What was your fear?
I think that my biggest, most pervasive fear when it comes to anything is letting people down. And so anytime I hire people, whether it is as a contractor or as an employee, and no matter what role, my biggest fear in that process is letting that person down, and that can look like all sorts of different things, but that I think is sort of the underlying thread of fear that ties it all together. And in that makes it challenging to hire people in a lot of other logistical reasons, because I worry about, not getting things done in time. I worry about not having the ideas that they need. I worry about not making the money that they need. I worry, but it all comes back to a fear of letting them down. From a tactical or a logistical perspective, in terms of working through fear around delegation and things like that, I don't have a problem kind of letting go of work, when I have identified work that can be let go of, I'm very happy to let it go. Like that's not an issue. Where I find the issue comes up is identifying work that can be let go. Because up until say the beginning of this year, there was a lot of work that I assumed, like I didn't even recognize that I was doing it, which sounds ridiculous perhaps, but it's very true. Like that's my experience of it, is that I was doing work that I didn't realize was work, and that I thought I was the only one who could do it.
Yeah.
And so kind of going back to this ownership piece, the more I have been able to give people ownership over areas of the business and an understanding of how that area of the business ties into our bigger vision, the easier it is to identify work that I am doing that can be let go of. And so now I am acutely aware of the work that I do on a day-to-day basis that eventually I should not be doing. Like like any business owner or like any small business owner, I do still wear multiple hats. So while Shannon leads operations and Kristen leads member experience, and we have a finance and admin person, I still lead marketing, and I still have a hand in the vast majority of the marketing actions that happen. And that's work that I do. But I also know like, that's a hat that I could give to someone else. When we're ready to hire that next person, I can hire a full-time marketing director and be done with all of that. There is nothing in that work that requires me to be the one that does it. It's just that in the team that we have now, my strengths allow me to put that hat on most easily and most efficiently and affordably for where we are business-wise right now. But I don't think that I would have been able to see that even a year ago because I wasn't fully aware still of the work that I was still doing, if that makes sense.
No, it makes so much sense. And I'm curious for you, if you think about like the big leap and your zone of genius, like what is the work that lights you up, that doesn't feel like work, that you are just so on fire on, and you like, even if you knew that you could let go of it, you wouldn't want to?
I think that my zone of genius tends to come in creating structure for things. So my Myers-Briggs is INTP, which is one of the, it's not the most unusual combination, but it's one of the more unusual combinations, especially for
I haven't met many INTPs for sure.
And so people that have been, hypothetically typed as INTP are like C.S. Lewis and, some of the people who have created fantasy worlds with all the details and all the systems and all the languages. And that is my zone of genius. Like I love the idea of creating a fantasy world. And so to me, and it's funny, I haven't actually articulated this way before, but to me, CoCommercial is a fantasy world, right? It's my fantasy. It's my fantasy where we all hang out on the internet all day and we talk about business and life and transformation and doing things on a deeper level. And I'm the world creator in that universe that we have there, that fantasy world. And that means that I get to at least be the visionary behind the culture and the structure of it and how things run and sort of the laws of physics within that fantasy world. And outside of that, the characters, the setting, that can take on a life of its own. I don't feel the need to direct every last action. I'm the person who sets the stage. And so I would not be so bold as to say that I could not give up that work and that I would not give up that work, because I absolutely would in order to go do that in some other sphere. We're not there yet. And I'm not itching to go off into another sphere to do that work, but I could absolutely see handing it off, sort of like the way like Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, his son writes the Dune books now. Right. And so he was able to pass on that world to somebody else. And I can totally see being able to pass on this world to somebody else. But at the same time, that is absolutely my zone of genius. That's the work that does not feel like work. I would do it regardless of whether I got paid for it or not.
Oh, I love it. I'm getting chills and I'm thinking about Ready Player One and my daughter, her creating her Minecraft world. It's like,
Yes, exactly.
sometimes you're creating the world on your own and sometimes you're like doing it with people, other people. So that's just really fascinating. And thank you for sharing that with me. There's so much goodness in here. I think one last thing I'd love to ask before we kind of start to close up is knowing that you're the I, the introvert, but also an amazing marketer and being able to create that community and connection and storytelling. I'm curious how you manage to share that consistent, valuable content online and stay creatively connected to your work. And maybe if you have any habits or rituals that get you into the flow to share, even though you probably would rather just be in your own little world, but you also do share with the rest of the world the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about what it means to be an introvert. And so as an introvert, I have never had a problem showing up and sharing my work. I might have a problem showing up at a party, but I don't have a problem showing up and sharing my work. And that's not draining to me at all. I do find kind of small talk, social interaction to be draining. I find that I absolutely need a lot of kind of personal downtime in between social events, but I love social events and I love connecting with people and I love talking to people on the internet. I mean, that's kind of my job. And I absolutely adore those things. I just need time to myself in between them. And so for me, actually, my fitness practice that I have built for myself over the last couple of years has been a really important part of this. And sort of like, I've never been one for meditation. Like, I love the idea of it. I tried like the Headspace app for a while and it just wasn't a routine that I could settle into, but give me a pair of headphones and send me running for 4 or 5 miles. And I'm like, okay, moving meditation done. Right. And it took me a while to get to that point. Please don't get me wrong. But even just the disconnection from my office and my couch and my kitchen, of getting outside and moving has always been a really great way for me to recharge. And so now that I have like a very particular fitness routine, fitness practice that I do in the mornings, that is a way that I recharge and set myself up for success every single day. And I know that when I'm done working out, I feel a lot more prepared for being visible and for showing up. And so, like I said, publishing work has never scared me before. Showing up with my work and sharing what I've been thinking about in isolation has never scared me before. But I have, in the last couple of months, been wrestling with some newly realized fear around visibility in sort of a different way, where I've realized that one of the reasons that I've been okay always with hitting publish is because I've crafted spaces where my work is going to be received well. And that I've realized that I have cut myself off from bigger opportunities because I didn't want to venture into spaces where I didn't know how the work would be received. And so it's a much longer story than I can get into right now, but there is an opportunity I'm in the middle of that is introducing my work to vast new audiences. And it's causing, at the beginning especially, but still now, it has caused a lot more stress that I'm still kind of understanding and wrestling with for myself. So I don't have a complete answer for your question, but just that I'm recognizing that there are different levels of visibility that I'm comfortable with. There are different levels of publishing or putting my work out into the world that I'm comfortable with, and that I need to really push into the levels that cause me discomfort now, because my business won't work if I only stay in the bubble that will receive my work well, if that makes sense.
Oh, I love that so much. One, just for all of us to take the time to observe, where are we showing up and being visible? Because I think a lot of times we discredit the work that's already working, and also paying attention to where is a place that you can kind of push yourself to the edge for that growth and that discomfort, and even coming back to that quote, of the real workout starts when you want to stop. Right. And so you're right at that edge again. I also love the replenishing yourself with that me time, the moving meditation, the separation from your home, from your couch, from your office, that replenishes you to show up and be more available for your community. And I think that is a huge part of leading with love. It means to take care of your community, to take care of your team, but also to take care of yourself as the leader so that you can serve from the overflow. So I love that you were able to really see that that's what gives you the energy to continue to share your work in the world.
Yeah, it's been quite a revelation for me, and I am thankful for it every single day.
Oh my goodness. I love it so much. And I just love you, Tara. Like, I just love your openness and transparency and just your commitment to really creating that fantasy world for the online small businesses, which I'm just like, I want to play in that world now.
Good. Well, come and invite all your friends.
Yes. And I will definitely link to CoCommercial. And I know you're also the host of WeWorks. What Works? WeWorks.
That would be cool though, but right. Yeah, definitely What Works.
What Works podcast. Is there an episode of yours that you think that people would really love to dig into? And I'm happy to link to one of those episodes.
Oh, that's a good question. Trying to think of like what recent episodes. I mean, they're like
all amazing.
Yeah, it's like asking me to pick my favorite child. Luckily, I only have one child, so I can always pick my favorite child. This is harder. Well, I'll just say, so no, I can't think of an episode off the top of my head that is like super special to me, but our podcast is really different in that we're actually talking to business owners about what's working for them. It's not an advice podcast. I mean, in many ways, that's what you're doing here too. But we're really like on the nitty gritty, like tell me what the process is. Give me all the details. What's this process look like for you? And so, I always encourage people to kind of pick through and look and see, what is something you're struggling with right now that you'd love to see how someone else does it. That's what we do. That's what's available for you in our podcast.
And I guess I'm not sure when my episode will go live, but I forgot, like I have an interview with you.
Yeah. So I don't know when this podcast is going live. So who knows? There could be a beautiful synergy happening here.
Absolutely. Awesome, Tara. Is there anything else we haven't covered or any last words that you'd love to share before we say goodbye?
Oh, goodness. I feel like we've covered so much. I think that the kind of like parting thoughts is just to make sure that the questions you're asking about your business are actually your own questions, kind of to loop back to where we started. There's just so much misdirection and so much attention giving to things that are not the real questions, the real obstacles, the real challenges in our businesses. And if you want to work towards an actual personal empowerment, business empowerment in your business, it starts with making sure that the questions that you're asking are your own.
I love that. And I love that really taking that power back for ourselves is the most empowered choice. So
yeah.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your heart and attention in listening to Lead with Love. If this message, leading with love in life and business, and remembering the humans and beating hearts behind the numbers and all of that good stuff, I would love for you to take the time to leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people find out about the goodness and helping spreading more love in the world, which we really, really need. So I would really appreciate that, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.